Picture this. You're standing in the harsh fluorescent glare of a break room fridge.
Oh, the absolute worst lighting imaginable, right?
Just that buzzing, soul-sucking light. And you are staring at an empty shelf.
A tragedy.
It really is. In your hand is this cheap little plastic spoon, and in your heart is just this crushing existential despair. And why? Because someone stole your pudding. And not just any pudding, right? The pudding with your name clearly written on it in permanent marker.
It's a specific kind of violation.
It totally is. It feels like the universe is singling you out. Like
Yeah.
the whole system is just rigged to break your spirit one stolen snack at a time.
Yeah, it's the absolute definition of a mundane tragedy.
Exactly. And, we've all been there. It's that feeling of complete powerlessness disguised as just a minor inconvenience.
Well, and it's comforting in a weird way to get mad about the pudding.
Oh, for sure. Because if you focus all your rage on that tiny plastic cup of dairy and sugar.
Right, you don't have to look at the massive structural chaos of your actual life.
Yes, you don't have to face the real problems. But then you step back and you realize, what if the stolen pudding isn't just a bad day at the office?
What if it's more?
Right. What if that empty shelf is actually a profound theological provocation?
And that right there is the exact threshold where we leave the break room and step into the cosmic, muddy waters of ancient philosophy.
The deep end.
We are taking that mundane frustration and elevating it to the literal level of spiritual warfare.
Which I'm so excited for. And we are doing that today by applying this lens to a universe you listening are already very familiar with, the television series Lucifer.
Such a great show.
It is. You know the show. You know the charismatic devil, the procedural crime-solving, the celestial family drama. But today, we're looking past the devil, past the angels, past the demons. We are focusing entirely on the man who stood in front of that fridge.
The one and only.
The guy affectionately, and let's be honest, sometimes cruelly mocked by everyone as Detective Douche. Daniel Espinosa. We are taking a deep dive into the character arc of Dan, but we're cross-referencing his journey with a stack of ancient secret texts.
And this is where it gets wild.
It really does. We're talking texts from the Nag Hammadi Library, the Apocryphon of John, the Gospel of Mary of Magdala, the Gospel of Philip, and the Gospel of Thomas.
Theaters.
Plus, we're bringing in some incredibly dense theological discussions from modern internet forums about the ancient religion of Gnosticism. We've got these explain like 5 Reddit threads that really break it down.
It might sound completely counterintuitive, to connect a modern Los Angeles police procedural to texts written millennia ago.
Right, texts that were literally buried in the Egyptian desert.
Exactly. Stuffed in a sealed clay jar to hide them from Orthodox authorities who wanted them burned.
Which is just so dramatic.
It is. But mythological archetypes naturally reemerge in our storytelling. They don't just disappear because we have smartphones or forensic labs or streaming platforms.
They bubble back up.
They do, because they reflect our deepest psychological truths. The human condition hasn't fundamentally changed. I mean, we are all still trying to figure out how to navigate a world that often feels deeply unfair and structurally flawed.
And that is the ultimate promise of this deep dive. By looking at Dan through the lens of these buried texts, you are going to see how a man obsessed with procedure and pudding is actually the ultimate ancient allegory for the human soul.
Trying to break out of a rigged material universe.
Exactly. You are going to learn how to spot the unseen forces, what the ancients called archons, in your own life. And hopefully you will discover the exact mechanics of why the prison cell of your own guilt might just be completely unlocked, just waiting for you to simply push the door open.
To understand the sheer scale of what Dan represents, we have to start by establishing the mechanical framework of the universe he's trapped in.
Let's lay the groundwork.
So we have this foundational Reddit thread in our sources and explain, on a 5 breakdown of Gnostic theology.
Which is super helpful, by the way.
Oh, incredibly helpful. And we're pairing that with the Apocryphon of John. Now, Gnosticism operates on a premise that completely flips Orthodox Western religion upside down.
It's a total paradigm shift.
Right. Because in traditional frameworks, the creator of the physical universe is the ultimate perfect God.
Yeah, the big guy upstairs.
And the physical world is considered inherently good, even if it's, fallen. But Gnosticism looks at the disease, the suffering, the cruelty of the natural world, and asks a purely logical question.
Which is?
How could a perfect, unfathomable entity of pure love create a universe where life literally has to consume other life just to survive.
Right. Like, why did you build a system where lions have to eat gazelles?
Exactly. The answer they arrived at is pretty jarring. They concluded that the true God did not create this material world at all.
Let that sink in for a second. The true God didn't build this.
Correct. They posited the existence of a being called the monad.
The monad.
Yeah. The Apocryphon of John describes the monad as the true, unfathomable, immeasurable, invisible God. It's pure light, pure goodness.
Existing entirely outside of time and space.
Completely, outside of matter entirely. It's so perfect that it can't even be comprehended by the human mind. And surrounding the monad is this spiritual ecosystem called the pleroma.
Which translates to the divine fullness, right?
Yes, the divine fullness. It's a realm of pure consciousness and eternal light.
Okay, but obviously we are not in the pleroma.
Clearly not.
Right. We are here dealing with traffic and taxes and stolen snacks. So how did we get here?
Well, according to the myth, the material world was created by a lesser flawed entity known as the demiurge.
The demiurge.
Yeah, and in the Apocryphon of John, this entity is often called Yaldabaoth.
Yaldabaoth, that is a name.
It's a mouthful. And he is described as having the face of a lion and the body of a serpent. He's ignorant, he's flawed, and he is supremely arrogant.
So he's not evil, necessarily, just kind of incompetent?
Arrogant and ignorant. Yaldabaoth fashioned the physical universe, but because he himself is a flawed being disconnected from the true light of the monad, the universe he built is inherently flawed.
Makes sense. Flawed builder, flawed builder.
Yeah, exactly. It's a closed system of decay and suffering.
Mm-hmm.
The Reddit theologians in our sources summarize this perfectly. They say the demiurge believes he is the only God.
Right. He doesn't even know the monad exists.
And he forces humanity to submit to his will, blinding them with the heavy, dense illusions that make up our physical reality. He didn't build a garden. He built a prison.
And we are the inmates.
We are the inmates.
But the text is really clear that we aren't just material beings. Like, the crucial catch in Gnosticism is that humanity contains a divine spark.
The spark of the monad.
Right. We have a fragmented piece of that true, unfathomable monad trapped inside these dense physical bodies.
Mm-hmm.
So we are eternal, spiritual beings trapped in a biological material matrix ruled over by an ignorant architect.
Which brings us directly to how Gnosticism categorizes the human beings navigating this matrix, because the ancient texts suggest that humanity generally falls into three distinct categories.
3 types of people.
Yeah, based on their relationship to that internal spark and the material world around them. And understanding these 3 categories is the key to decoding the entire social ecosystem of the precinct in the show.
Okay, let's break those categories down, because when you map them to the characters you already know from Lucifer, it is chillingly accurate.
It really is. So the first category is the Hylics.
Hylics. Hylics.
Right. The word roughly translates to matter or flesh.
Okay.
These are individuals who are purely material in their orientation. They are governed entirely by appetite, base impulses, and the physical senses.
So they're just completely absorbed in the physical world.
Completely. They have no interest in the spiritual, no inner light pulling them toward anything higher. They are fully assimilated into the demiurge's system.
And when you look at the show, this maps flawlessly to a character like Malcolm Graham.
Oh, Malcolm is the perfect example.
Right. You remember Malcolm. He's the deeply corrupt cop who drags Dan into his mess in the early seasons.
Yep.
Malcolm literally goes to hell, gets brought back, and his only defining characteristic upon returning is this grotesque, insatiable hunger.
He just wants to eat.
He just wants to consume food, consume power, and survive at absolutely any cost.
Right.
He has no moral center. He has no internal conflict about his actions. He is the pure Hylic. He is entirely flesh.
On the absolute opposite end of that spectrum, you have the second category, which is the pneumatics.
Pneumatics.
Pneuma is the Greek word for spirit. So these are the spirit-filled individuals. They naturally possess the light, and they are awake to it.
They just have it figured out.
Yeah, they don't have to struggle agonizingly to find their goodness. It simply radiates from them, seemingly unaffected by the darkness or corruption of the material world around them.
And that is Ella Lopez,
Unquestionably.
the forensic scientist. Our sources connect Ella to the Gnostic figure of Zoe, which translates directly to life.
Yes.
Ella is a pneumatic. Think about her role in the show. She is surrounded by literal murder, blood, and the darkest depravity humanity has to offer on a daily basis.
She literally works at crime scenes.
Right. She even unknowingly dates a serial killer at one point. But her internal light never actually dims.
Never.
Her faith, Her relentless optimism, her core goodness is fundamentally incorruptible. She operates in the material world, but she's clearly tethered to something higher.
Which leaves us with the third category.
The big one.
The place where the vast majority of humanity resides and the absolute core of our deep dive today. The psychics.
And we should clarify, this doesn't mean psychic in the pop culture sense, right?
No, not reading minds or predicting the future. It comes from the Greek word psyche, meaning the soul or the mind.
Okay, so the people stuck in the middle, the battleground.
Precisely. The psychics are governed by the mind and the soul. They are caught in this perpetual tug of war between their base, hylic impulses, the heavy drag of the material world, and their divine pneumatic spark.
They're being pulled in both directions.
Always. They desperately want to be good, they feel the pull of a light, but they are deeply confused by the rules of the material world. They're constantly trying to reconcile the eternal with the mundane.
And this means Dan Espinosa is the ultimate psychic man.
He is the poster child for it.
He's the proxy for the viewer, really. He genuinely wants to be a good person. We see him try over and over again.
He really tries.
But he keeps getting embroiled in these convoluted, frankly embarrassing, deeply compromising messes.
Yep.
And the reason he keeps failing is that he is trying to achieve spiritual goodness by following the Demiurge's rules.
Let's explore the mechanics of that.
Yeah.
How exactly does his reliance on the rules trap him?
Well, think about his literal job. He is a police officer.
Right.
His entire identity is wrapped up in procedure, in the literal LAPD police code, in the hierarchy of the precinct, in clearing cases to maintain his societal status.
The rules of the game.
He operates under the assumption that if he perfectly executes the rules of the system, he will be validated as a good person.
Which is such a common trap.
It's like buying a high-end smartphone only to discover the operating system is completely corrupted from the factory.
Great analogy.
It's draining your battery, it's deleting your files, randomly shutting down. But instead of realizing the underlying code is malicious, you just keep obsessively reading the terms and conditions manual.
You think it's user error.
Exactly. You think that if you just follow the user agreement perfectly, if you just hold the phone the right way, it will fix itself.
Right.
Dan thinks if he just follows the rules of the world, he'll be saved. But the system itself is the cage.
That analogy cuts straight to the heart of the Nag Hammadi texts. Because if we examine the Gospel of Mary of Magdala, which is a really profound and radical text in our source stack, there is a very clear warning about this exact trap.
What does it say?
The Savior figure in that text explicitly teaches that the establishment of excessive laws and rules is a tool for domination, not liberation. Yeah, the text argues that rules set by ignorant authorities lead directly to vicious judgments, which only feed the passions of the lower world. It creates a cycle of guilt and punishment that keeps the soul trapped.
So the LAPD rulebook, the societal expectations of success, the entire structure Dan clings to in this cosmic reading, none of that is actual justice.
Not at all.
It is just the Demiurge's terms and conditions. It's a system of control designed to simulate order while maintaining captivity.
Precisely.
And Dan is driving himself insane trying to adhere to it. He's constantly failing because his divine spark inherently knows the system is rigged, even if his conscious mind hasn't accepted it yet.
He is looking for internal salvation through external compliance.
Oof, that's a powerful way to put it.
That is the tragedy of the psychic man. He's looking for the perfection of the monad and the flawed architecture of the demiurge. And because the demiurge cannot provide true spiritual nourishment, the archons, those celestial servants of the demiurge who act as the jailers of this reality, they have to provide substitutes to keep the inmates docile.
Which brings us back to the pudding.
Yes, the pudding.
I know we started with it, but we really need to dissect the actual theological weight of that snack. Because in the show, Dan's obsession with his labeled cup of pudding in the precinct fridge is played as a brilliant workplace comedy bit.
It's hilarious.
He covets it, he guards it, and Lucifer, the literal lord of hell, constantly steals it and eats it right in front of him.
Which infuriates Dan to no end.
Of course. But if you view that through the lens of a standard sitcom, it's just a funny character quirk.
Right. But if we connect this to the mechanics of Gnosticism, it becomes incredibly profound. In the Apocryphon of John, we learn about the tactics of the archons. They understand that if the human soul experiences the sheer, unadulterated horror of its imprisonment, it will wake up and attempt to escape.
They'd realize they're in a cage.
So they don't just rely on overt torture.
Because torture clarifies things.
Exactly. Instead, they use insidious distraction. They weave the material body as a sort of tomb, and they create minor material attachments to keep the divine spark focused entirely on the mundane.
Ah, I see where this is going.
The texts refer to this specific mechanism as the counterfeit spirit,
The counterfeit spirit.
or the cup of forgetfulness.
That's haunting.
It's the idea that the soul is given a heavy, intoxicating dose of material concern so that it forgets its divine origin. The archons simulate fulfillment through temporary, perishable pleasures.
So the pudding is quite literally the cup of forgetfulness.
It is.
Dan's intense emotional attachment to this tiny plastic cup of dairy and artificial flavoring represents his desperate need for the small comforts of his prison.
Right.
He's a divine, eternal being possessing a spark of the unfathomable monad, but his emotional state is entirely dictated by a snack.
It's the bowl of pottage he's willing to sell his eternal birthright for.
He uses it to self-soothe the existential dread of the psychic man.
And that framing completely changes how we view Lucifer's behavior.
It really does.
Because in a casual viewing, Lucifer stealing the pudding just looks like bullying.
Yeah, it just looks like a powerful being picking on a weaker one for amusement.
But in the Gnostic framework, Lucifer operates as the rebel spirit. He represents the Logos,
The logos.
the bringer of light, the illuminating principle that challenges the demiurge's closed system. So when Lucifer steals the pudding, it's not a prank. It's a targeted theological provocation.
He is attempting to shatter the illusion of the counterfeit spirit.
Yes, Lucifer is looking at Dan, looking at this eternal being trapped in flesh, and he's essentially demonstrating the absurdity of the attachment.
He's basically asking him, why are you crying over chemical sludge when you are an eternal being?
Exactly. Why are you allowing the archons to buy your compliance so cheaply?
It's an aggressive wake-up call, and there's a powerful quote in our sources from the Gospel of Philip that explains the mechanics of this dualism perfectly.
Oh, I love this quote.
The text states that worldly names and material attachments contain a great deception because they separate the heart from the things which are truly established. So by tethering your emotional well-being to a perishable object, like a cup of pudding that will eventually expire or be eaten by someone else, you're allowing your heart to be tethered to the perishable world.
You are participating in your own deception.
The Gospel of Philip is so uncompromising on this mechanism. When you invest your soul's energy into the transient, you become transient in your own mind. You bind yourself to the cycle of decay.
You're letting the demiurge win by agreeing that the material world is all that matters.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here, though.
Go for it.
Is it inherently wrong to just enjoy a snack? Because the material world is exhausting.
It is.
Traffic is terrible, jobs are stressful, relationships are hard. Are the Gnostic texts suggesting that we cannot enjoy a simple cup of coffee or a piece of chocolate or a moment of comfort without dooming our eternal souls?
That's a fair question.
Because that sounds just as oppressive as the demiurge's rules.
It's a vital distinction to make, and it comes down to the mechanics of attachment versus the orthodox concept of sin.
Okay.
In traditional frameworks, a sin is a moral failing, right? A breaking of a divine law that invites righteous punishment from an angry God.
Yeah, the classic view.
But in Gnosticism, the issue is not that the pudding itself is evil or morally corrupt. Matter is ignorant, not maliciously evil in itself. The trap is the need.
The need.
The trap is believing that the pudding is the source of your peace. The archons weaponize your reliance on it.
So it's about whether you own the object or the object owns you.
Precisely. And to illustrate this, we can look ahead to the very end of Dan's character arc. After he navigates the excruciating trials of the afterlife and finally ascends to heaven, we see him sitting peacefully, happily eating his pudding.
He gets the pudding. It's such a triumphant moment for him.
It is. But look at how the context has mechanically shifted. In heaven, the pudding is no longer the counterfeit spirit. It is no longer a coping mechanism used to numb the pain of a corrupted system. Because Dan has mastered his attachments, because he has achieved true spiritual liberation, the pudding has transformed into a pure, simple experience. He no longer needs it to avoid his internal guilt. He simply enjoys it.
He's transcended the deception.
Yes, he has transcended the deception of the material name, rendering the archon's tool completely powerless.
He beat the system so the material loses its venom.
Exactly.
But achieving that mastery, getting to that state of liberation, requires running an absolute gauntlet.
Oh, a brutal gauntlet.
The soul has to be tested. Which brings us to one of the most brilliant episodes of the series, and honestly, the most densely layered Gnostic allegory in our sources. The episode titled Daniel Espinosa, Naked and Afraid.
That specific episode serves as a perfect, scaled-down mechanical model for the chaos of the material world.
It really does.
It's an exploration of what happens when the psychic man's reliance on the demiurge's rules is pushed past his breaking point.
So to set the stage for you listening, Lucifer decides to orchestrate what he calls a grand prank on Dan. But because Lucifer is a celestial being, his version of a prank is not, a whoopee cushion.
No, it's not a whoopee cushion.
It is a massive, impossibly complex, violent, and utterly humiliating theatrical production.
Unrelenting.
Over the course of a single agonizing day, Dan is framed for murder, he gets tangled up with vicious Russian mobsters, he is accidentally poisoned.
He's involved in a wild bicycle chase while carrying a severed head in a box.
Right. And he's caught in the middle of explosive gang violence. It is absolute, unrelenting chaos.
And pay attention to how Dan responds to this chaos mechanically. Throughout the entire episode, Dan frantically tries to use his police logic, his reliance on procedure, his terms and conditions rulebook to solve the problem and regain control of his reality.
He thinks he can out-logic the maze.
Exactly.
But every time he thinks he has a handle on the situation, the floor drops out from under him. The rules just do not apply.
Because he is in the labyrinth of the archons. If we map this episode against the Apocryphon of John and the Gospel of Mary, we see a brilliant parallel to the journey of the ascending soul.
Okay, lay it out.
In the Gospel of Mary, there's a vivid, mechanical description of the soul's ascent after death, where it must pass by toll collectors.
Yeah.
Specifically, the 7 powers of wrath.
The text actually lists these powers, right?
It does. Mary recounts a vision where the soul is aggressively interrogated by these powers.
Who are they?
They're listed as darkness, desire, ignorance, zeal for death, the realm of the flesh, the foolish wisdom of the flesh, and the wisdom of the wrathful person.
Wow.
Collectively, they make up the oppressive force of wrath. They are the psychological and spiritual barriers that Demiurge places in the way of liberation.
And Dan encounters modern, literal manifestations of every single one of those powers in that single day.
He really does.
He faces the literal darkness of the criminal underworld. He faces the desire and greed of the mocksters fighting over territory and money. He's confronted by ignorance as everyone around him operates on false information. He faces the zeal for death and the constant threat of gunfire and poison. But the most insidious one he faces is his own foolish wisdom of the flesh.
His cop instincts.
Exactly. His reliance on the rules of the material world constantly lead him into worse traps. His wisdom is foolish because it's based on the logic of a broken system. He is being interrogated and tested by the chaotic forces of the world, and his traditional tools are entirely useless.
And in the Gnostic text, what do these powers actually try to do to the soul? They don't just try to kill it. They try to strip it, bind it, and lay claim to it.
They demand to know its origin.
Right, demanding it submit to their jurisdiction. The text explains that to pass these powers safely, the enlightened soul must realize that the archons have no legitimate divine authority.
It has to reject them.
To bypass them, the soul must systematically strip away the garments of the material world. It must shed its worldly identity.
The stripping of the garments. This is where the episode title becomes incredibly literal. Naked and afraid.
It's a central Gnostic metaphor. To reach the pleroma, you cannot take the heavy, dense armor of the ego, your societal status, or your material attachments with you. You must leave the flesh behind.
And in this episode, the archons of the maze systematically take everything that tethers Dan to his identity as Detective Dan Espinosa.
Piece by piece.
He loses his badge, he loses his dignity, he loses his illusion of control, and yes, through a series of humiliating events, he literally loses his clothes.
He's left completely naked.
Physically and psychologically shivering in the face of the universe. The system strips him bare.
Which sets up the profound climax of the episode. Because after all the terror, the violence, the poison, and the sheer exhaustion, Lucifer finally reveals the truth.
His big reveal.
He reveals that the entire day, every single terrifying obstacle was a massive, orchestrated theatrical prank. It was all fake.
It was all a play.
So how does Dan react to that revelation?
Well, he doesn't get angry. He doesn't arrest Lucifer. He doesn't yell about the rules. He just drops to his knees and breaks down into hysterical, genuine laughter.
And that laughter is not a sign of a broken mind. It's the ultimate Gnostic breakthrough. It is what the ancients called the laughter of the redeemed.
Let's explore the mechanics of that. Why is laughing at your own torture considered a spiritual breakthrough?
Because humor requires perspective. To laugh at a joke, you have to see the punchline from the outside.
Oh, that's good.
In that moment, Dan finally sees the joke of the material world. He realizes that the reality he took so incredibly seriously, the rules he clung to, the status he fought for, is all absurd.
It's just theater.
Highly malleable, constructed theater designed to keep him stressed and asleep. By laughing, Dan is surrendering his ego.
He's letting it go.
He's acknowledging his own complete powerlessness in the material realm, and paradoxically, that acknowledgement frees his mind from its grip. He stops fighting the labyrinth on his own terms and simply floats above it.
The laughter breaks the spell. He realizes the powers of wrath have no actual authority over his spark. It's an incredible moment of release.
Truly.
But achieving that enlightenment in a vacuum under extreme stress is one thing. Testing that enlightenment in the real world, specifically through the messy, complicated mechanics of human love, is another entirely.
The real test.
And that brings us to the most tragic, beautiful relationship in the series, Dan's connection with Charlotte Richards.
This is where the theological mapping becomes incredibly sophisticated. We are moving from the trials of the archons to the grand cosmological drama of Sophia.
The story of Sophia. Okay, so we all know the basic trajectory of Charlotte Richards in the show.
Let's recap it briefly.
Her body was hijacked by the goddess of all creation, God's exiled wife, the mother of angels, a celestial being hiding in a human suit. And Dan unknowingly falls in love with this celestial entity.
Right.
But eventually the goddess leaves that body to create her own universe. And when she vacates, the actual human Charlotte Richards is resurrected and thrown back into her own life.
Which is horrifying for her.
Because this human Charlotte has just spent months being tortured in hell while her body was possessed. So when she returns, she is deeply traumatized, terrified, and acutely aware of her own moral failings as a corrupt defense attorney.
This dual nature of Charlotte, the divine entity, followed by the traumatized human maps, flawlessly onto one of the most important, complex figures in Gnostic cosmology.
Sophia.
The figure of Sophia, which translates to divine wisdom.
The story of Sophia is wild. Let's unpack her fall, because it explains the entire creation of the material universe.
In the Apocryphon of John, Sophia is described as an emanation of the true God, a being residing in the perfect light of the pleroma.
Okay, she's up there in the light.
But she makes a catastrophic error. Out of a desire to create something on her own, without the consent of her divine partner or the unfathomable monad, she emanates a being into existence.
She acts alone.
And because this act of creation was done in ignorance, without the full balanced divine order, the result is an abortion, a monstrosity.
And that monstrosity is Yaldabaoth.
The demiurge.
The demiurge.
Exactly. Sophia accidentally generates the flawed architect who goes on to build our material prison.
Oops.
Yeah, a massive oops. When she realizes the horror of what she has done, the Apocryphon describes her profound despair. She realizes she lacks something. Her brilliant light grows dim. She is ashamed, terrified, and she repents.
She falls.
She is cast down from the pleroma into the lower realms, suffering immensely because of her mistake, desperately trying to find her way back to the light while navigating the chaotic world her offspring created.
So within this cosmology, we have two distinct aspects of this figure. We have the higher Sophia, the divine, pure, untarnished wisdom from the pleroma.
Right.
And we have the lower Sophia, the fallen, terrified wisdom, trapped in the material world, acutely aware of her sins, trying to fix her mistakes and escape damnation.
And Dan, the psychic man, falls in love with both of them.
It's brilliant writing. When Dan is falling for the goddess inside the human body, he is unknowingly interacting with the higher Sophia. Our sources point out that this represents humanity's innate gravitational pull toward the divine.
And we can't help it.
Even when the divine is buried in flesh, buried in the mundane reality of a police precinct, the psychic man is drawn to it. Dan doesn't consciously know why he's so captivated by her. He just feels the undeniable resonance of the eternal.
But the true test of the psychic man comes when the divine illusion shatters.
Right. The goddess leaves. The real human Charlotte returns from hell. And she is the embodiment of the lower Sophia.
She's a mess.
She remembers flashes of her torture in hell. She is painfully aware that she was a selfish, corrupt lawyer who ruined lives. She is terrified of eternal damnation, vibrating with anxiety, and desperately trying to figure out how to be a good person to avoid going back to the pit.
Her light has grown dim and she's repenting.
It's easy to love the higher Sophia. It's easy to love perfection. But what does Dan do when faced with the lower Sophia?
This is why Dan is the hero of the story. He doesn't abandon her.
He stays.
It would be so easy for him to walk away. It's like, imagine moving into an incredible, high-tech, flawless mansion, only to realize a few months later that the person you thought owned it was just a house sitter.
Yeah.
And when the real owner comes back, they're terrified, the house is a mess, the plumbing is broken, and they're hiding in the closet.
You don't just break the lease and run.
If you truly care, you stay. You help them clean up the house. Dan stays to help her heal.
And that choice to stay, that mechanical process of healing, represents what Gnostic texts call the marriage of the soul.
The marriage of the soul.
Dan, representing the human mind, the psychic man, who has just begun to understand the absurdity of the material world, commits himself to helping the fallen Sophia return to the light.
He supports her.
He patiently encourages her to do good, not out of fear of punishment, but out of genuine care. He loves her through her terror.
But the mechanics of that healing are mutual, aren't they? He isn't just fixing her. The act of helping her does something to him.
Completely. Because by doing the heavy emotional work of restoring her, by acting out of pure, selfless compassion rather than adhering to demiurgic rules of societal expectation, he is actually generating true gnosis.
He's lightening his own soul.
The text suggests that humanity's ultimate purpose is to help gather the scattered sparks of divine light and return them to the pleroma.
Right.
By loving the lower Sophia and helping her redeem herself, Dan is literally helping to repair the cosmological tear in the fabric of the universe that her fall created.
He is healing the cosmos through the simple, profound act of being a supportive partner.
It's beautiful.
But as we know, this universe does not deal in easy fairy tale endings. Charlotte is tragically murdered just as she begins to find her redemption.
Oh, sad.
And shortly after, in a devastating turn of events, Dan himself is killed in the line of duty.
Yeah, that was rough.
And this brings us to the darkest, most conceptually challenging part of our deep dive. Because when Dan dies, he does not go to heaven.
He goes to hell.
He goes to hell. It's a shocking narrative choice, but it is where the show's specific mythology and Gnostic theology align most powerfully. It offers the most profound, mechanical explanation of the human condition in our entire stack of sources.
It's heartbreaking for you as the viewer. Dan dies trying to do the right thing. He has spent years trying to be a better man, supporting Charlotte, protecting his daughter, doing the grueling internal work. And when he dies, he wakes up in the dark.
Yeah.
A guy who tried that hard ends up in hell. How does that make any sense?
To understand the mechanics of why Dan is there, we have to look closely at how hell operates within the universe of Lucifer, because it differs radically from traditional Orthodox views, but it aligns perfectly with the psychology of Gnosticism.
Because in traditional mainstream religion, hell is a place of active, externally imposed punishment.
Right, fire and brimstone.
You break the moral laws set by a vengeful god, you get cast into a lake of fire, demons torture you with pitchforks, and the door is firmly locked from the outside. The Creator is punishing you.
But in the show's cosmology, the doors of hell are unlocked.
Literally unlocked.
Literally. There are no locks. Anyone can leave, walk through the door, and ascend to heaven at any time.
Then why are billions of souls down there? Why doesn't everyone just leave?
Because they're kept there entirely by their own guilt.
Their own guilt.
The mechanics of hell dictate that souls are trapped in hell loops. They're forced to continuously relive the moments they regret most, the moments they feel the most shame about.
Oh, man.
And they stay in the loops because, on a fundamental subconscious level, they believe they deserve to be punished. They are their own jailers.
And this connects directly back to the Apocryphon of John.
It does.
Because the text explicitly lists the demons of the body, the archons of the mind that were created by Yaldabaoth to torment humanity. They are not physical monsters with horns, they are psychological states.
Psychological demons.
The text lists them clearly. The demons of fear, grief, distress, and vain conceit.
That is the ultimate revelation of the psychic man's journey. Dan is not being punished by a vengeful monad. God did not send him to hell.
He just sent himself.
Dan is being held captive by the prosecutor inside his own head. His lingering guilt over his past corruption, his deep-seated fear that he was never truly a good enough father or partner, that is the ultimate tool of the demiurge.
Wow.
The archons don't need to build a physical cage of iron and fire. If they can convince you to build a mental one, lock yourself inside it and throw away the key.
The demiurge outsources the punishment to the victim. It is incredibly insidious. So the crucial question becomes, what is the mechanical process of escape? How does Dan get out of a locked room when he is the one holding the door shut?
That's the million-dollar question.
Because we see him try everything. He tries to fight his way out. He tries to use his detective logic to outsmart the loop, but he can't. He cannot get out by following the law or doing more good deeds, because you cannot execute physical actions in a realm of pure psychology.
Exactly. He cannot use demiurgic tools to solve a spiritual problem. To escape, he must achieve the ultimate Gnostic victory, internal gnosis.
What does gnosis actually look like in practice for Dan Espinosa?
It looks like pure, unadulterated self-forgiveness.
Self-forgiveness.
Dan eventually has to realize that the guilt paralyzing him is a lie told to him by his own ego. He has to realize that the entire system of crime and punishment he spent his life adhering to, the system that says he must suffer forever for his mistakes, is an illusion generated by the lower world.
A total illusion.
He has to completely let go of the core belief that he is fundamentally flawed and unworthy of the light.
He has to finally stop reading the terms and conditions of his own damnation.
Precisely. And there's a profound, illuminating connection here to the Gospel of Mary. In that text, the Savior figure teaches Mary a radical truth about the nature of judgment. The text says, "Judgment and condemnation for sin belong to the lower world. Once the soul has been set free, the powers no longer have any power over it."
Judgment belongs to the lower world. Let's pause on that, because that is a massive paradigm shift.
It is the absolute core of spiritual liberation. As long as Dan accepts the judgment of the lower world, as long as he agrees with the archons that his guilt defines him, he remains entirely subject to their powers.
He's playing their game.
He grants them jurisdiction over his soul. They can torment him forever because he is agreeing to the rules of their court. But the very microsecond he forgives himself, he strips them of their jurisdiction. He rejects the premise of their court entirely.
And we see this mechanically represented on screen. The moment he finally sheds his guilt, the show literally shows him beginning to glow with a brilliant golden light.
He shines.
He doesn't fight the demons. He simply walks past them. He walks past the toll collectors and the gatekeepers of the lower world, and he simply ascends. He floats up to heaven, not because God finally decided he had suffered enough and opened a trapdoor, but because Dan finally realized he was lighter than the darkness surrounding him.
It is the profound realization that the divine spark cannot be held by dense matter or psychological torment unless it actively chooses to be held.
That's incredible.
Gnosis is not about learning a secret magical password to bypass a guard. It is simply remembering your true nature. Once you remember you are light, the darkness cannot grip you.
Detective Douche achieves nirvana. It is an incredible character arc. But to truly appreciate the supreme irony and the narrative masterpiece of Dan Espinosa, we need to zoom out. We need to look at his achievement in the context of the rest of the cast.
Right.
Because when you map the other characters to the Gnostic cosmology, the scale of what Dan accomplishes is mind-blowing.
Let's do that mapping. We've established the core archetypes, so let's look at how the rest of the pleroma, the divine cast of characters, fits around the psychic man.
Let's start with the titular character, Lucifer. In our Gnostic reading, Lucifer represents the rebel spirit. He is the Logos.
Yes, the Logos, the Word, the active illuminating principle of the divine that enters the darkness to bring knowledge.
In this framework, he isn't the villain of the story. He is the necessary friction. He is the messenger who brings the metaphorical apple of gnosis to wake humanity up from the demiurge's slumber.
Wake him up.
And his mechanical arc is fascinating because he eventually evolves from acting as the warden of hell to becoming its therapist.
From warden to therapist.
He stops physically punishing people and starts actively helping them confront their internal guilt so they can break their own loops and ascend.
Which is a perfect modern representation of the Logos descending into the lower material realms, not to conquer, but to rescue the trapped sparks of light and guide them home.
Then we have Chloe Decker, Dan's ex-wife, his former partner, and Lucifer's true love. The sources map her to the epinoia, or the higher Sophia.
Epinoia translates roughly to thought or insight. In the ancient myths, the epinoia is often described as a divine helper hidden within humanity to aid in their awakening.
And Chloe's origin in the show is quite literal. She is a miracle. God explicitly blessed her parents so she would be born.
She's the variable.
She operates as the organic variable introduced into the demiurge's otherwise rigid, predictable system. She is the only human who makes Lucifer, the celestial spirit, physically vulnerable. She acts as a perfect mirror, reflecting his true, evolving self back to him so he can achieve his own realization.
We also have Dr. Linda Martin, the human therapist who counsels angels and demons. She functions as the psychopomp.
The guide for souls.
Exactly. Much like Hermes in Greek mythology or Charon ferrying souls across the river Styx. But Linda operates entirely in the realm of the mind. She doesn't fight physical battles with flaming swords. She categorizes the divine, applying psychological frameworks to celestial trauma, helping these massive, powerful entities navigate the terrifying liminal spaces of their own existence. She is a Socratic guide, asking the questions that lead to gnosis.
And finally, we have God himself. In Lucifer, God is not presented as a static, unchanging, perfect being. He is presented as an evolving demiurge.
An evolving demiurge.
He starts out distant, cryptic, and seemingly manipulative, relying on mysterious ways. But through his interactions with his children, particularly Lucifer, he achieves a sort of gnosis of himself.
He wakes up too.
He realizes that his grand plan is actually stifling them. He realizes the system he built is a cage, and his ultimate act of love is to literally retire, to leave this universe entirely and go to another so his creations can finally have true free will and grow without his shadow looming over them.
It is a remarkably generous, almost optimistic reading of the demiurge archetype, allowing the flawed creator to recognize his flaws and evolve alongside his creation rather than just being defeated by it.
It's deeply optimistic, but here is the ultimate synthesis. Here's why we are dedicating an entire deep dive to a guy obsessed with pudding. Look at that surrounding cast.
Look at them.
Lucifer is an ancient, superpowered celestial angel. Chloe is a literal, divinely crafted miracle who makes angels vulnerable. Ella is naturally filled to the brim with incorruptible pneumatic spirit. Linda is a psychological genius who gets to read the minds of gods. Dan is just a guy.
He is the ultimate, unadorned, psychic man.
He is the only one who had to do it the hard way. He wasn't born a miracle. He didn't have wings. He wasn't gifted with an incorruptible spirit. He had to figure out how to become divine, how to achieve ultimate spiritual liberation, while covered in Russian mobster blood, dealing with a messy divorce, battling deep-seated insecurity, and fighting over a plastic cup of dairy in a break room.
That is the supreme irony of the narrative, and it's why his arc is the most profound. Dan's journey is the most agonizing, because it is the most undeniably human. He has no celestial shortcuts. He has no magic. He only has his own mind to battle.
But the beautiful part is that he doesn't achieve this breakthrough entirely in a vacuum. The stories of the Logos and the Psychic Man intersect one last time to provide the mechanical key to Dan's escape. How does Dan finally grasp the concept of selflessness required to forgive himself in hell?
How did he do it?
He gets it by witnessing Lucifer's ultimate act.
We have to look at the climax of Season 5. Lucifer makes a choice to sacrifice himself. He flies up into heaven, a realm he was eternally banished from, a realm where he firmly believes his physical presence will cause him to instantly burn to ash in order to resurrect Chloe.
He chooses complete, absolute selflessness over his own continued existence. He is willing to be annihilated to save the epinoia.
And in doing so mechanically, he shatters the old law of the demiurge. The demiurge system dictates that rules are absolute, that banishment is permanent, and that self-preservation is the highest material law. By sacrificing himself, Lucifer proves that love supersedes the architectural rules of the universe. The Logos perfectly models absolute selflessness.
And it is that modeled selflessness that echoes down into hell and allows Dan, the psychic man, to finally understand the assignment. If the devil himself, the ultimate symbol of pride and rebellion, can sacrifice his ego out of pure love, if the rebel can forgive, then maybe, just maybe, Dan Espinosa can forgive himself. The Logos breaks the cosmological cycle, demonstrating the mechanism that allows the human mind to finally unlock its own prison cell.
It creates a perfectly balanced theological ecosystem. The divine entity descends to the material level to model selfless love, which in turn provides the energetic blueprint for the human mind to ascend through the profound act of self-forgiveness. The above feeds the below, so the below can rise above.
It is unbelievable. Who would have thought that a police procedural about the devil solving crimes in Los Angeles could serve as a perfect, mechanical translation of the secret texts buried in the Nag Hammadi library?
Myth always finds a way to the surface.
Yeah.
It is the language the human soul uses to explain its own imprisonment and map its own escape.
It really is. And that brings us to the final takeaway for you listening right now. We've talked a lot about ancient texts, archons, and hell loops. But how does the Gospel of Daniel Espinosa actually apply to your life today? Look, you might feel a lot like Dan right now. You might feel bullied by the universe.
We've all been there.
You might feel trapped in a convoluted, seemingly impossible maze of bills, relationship drama, societal expectations, and bureaucratic rules that make absolutely no logical sense. You might feel like the operating system of your life is deeply corrupted, and no matter how closely you follow the terms and conditions, your battery is always draining.
And in the face of that exhaustion, you might be clinging to your own version of pudding just to cope with the dread.
We all have our pudding. It might be endless scrolling on your phone. It might be a literal snack. It might be a toxic relationship or an obsession with status. We all have that material distraction we use to numb the realization that we are meant for something more. But remember the mechanical Gnostic truth we unpacked today. The rules of the material world cannot save you. Perfecting your compliance to a broken system will not fix your soul. And more importantly, the prison cell of your own guilt, the mental hell loop you might be stuck in right now, replaying your worst mistakes over and over, is completely unlocked.
The archons of fear, grief, distress, and anxiety only possess the power you grant them. They only have jurisdiction if you agree to stand trial in their court.
You just have to forgive yourself to push the door open. You have to let go of the judgment of the lower world. You have to realize that your spark is entirely independent of your mistakes.
And as we close, I want to leave you with one final, deeply provocative thought. A small, strange nugget from the ancient text to mull over. In the book of Genesis, chapter 49, verse 17, which is prominently featured in the theological sources we use today, there is a fascinating cryptic prophecy regarding the tribe of Dan.
I love this piece of the puzzle. Let's hear the exact verse.
The verse reads, Dan shall be a snake by the roadside, a viper along the path, that bites the horse's heel so that its rider falls backward.
So that its rider falls backward. Think about the mechanical implications of that imagery within everything we just discussed. Did the most average character in the show, the guy everyone mocked, the guy everyone dismissed as just a corrupt cop, the guy everyone called a douche, actually play the role of the cosmic supant? Did Dan quietly, through his incredibly messy, perfectly human struggle for redemption, bite the heel of the grand cosmic order? Did his agonizing journey force the evolving demiurge to fall backward, ultimately allowing the entire universe to evolve into something better?
It is a question worth asking yourself the next time you feel small, powerless, or irrelevant in the face of a massive, indifferent system.
Because even the guy fighting for his stolen snack in the fluorescent glow of a break room fridge might just be the catalyst that breaks the universe wide open. Keep your spark bright, forgive yourself, and think about that the next time you reach for the pudding.